Rocky wasn't just another boxing movie, it was like a hard left hook that shook Hollywood and changed how underdog stories were told. Behind the sweat, the training runs, and the powerful punches was a real-life story that was just as tough as what we saw on screen. Here are 20 strange, untold, and inspiring facts about Rocky. Plus, a final bonus fact that even die-hard fans don't know. Let's step into the ring. 1. Stallone wrote the script in just 3 days. Sylvester Stallone didn't spend months polishing the story of Rocky. He wrote it in just 3 feverish days. The inspiration came after watching Muhammad Ali fight Chuck Wepner in 1975. Wepner, an unknown underdog, lasted 15 rounds with the champ, and Stallone saw his own life reflected in that fight. At the time, Stallone had only $16 in his bank account, rent overdue, and no success as an actor. But instead of quitting, he sat down and poured everything he had into a story about a nobody who finally gets a chance. He later admitted that writing Rocky was his way of surviving, a desperate act that somehow turned into greatness. 2. He refused a huge paycheck to play Rocky. When Stallone showed the script around, United Artists loved it. They offered him $350,000, a life-changing amount for someone broke. But there was one condition. He couldn't play Rocky. The studio wanted a big name like Robert Redford, Burt Reynolds, or James Caan. Stallone shocked everyone by refusing the money. He believed only he could play the role because Rocky wasn't just a character, it was his own life story. The gamble nearly cost him everything, but Stallone stayed firm. Eventually, the producers gave in, but the budget was slashed to just $1 million. That stubborn choice changed his life forever. 3. A low-budget film held together with tape. Because of Stallone's insistence on starring, the movie had almost no money. Every corner was cut. Costumes came from the actors' own closets. Rocky's shoes were so worn out they had to be taped together, and extras were recruited from family and friends. The production couldn't afford filming permits either, so many scenes were shot guerrilla style in Philadelphia, hoping the police wouldn't stop them. Even the famous training montage with Rocky running through the city was captured with a cameraman in a van, weaving through traffic to keep up. The scrappy look wasn't planned. It was survival. Ironically, that roughness made the film feel more authentic. 4. Rocky's dog was Stallone's real pet. One of the sweetest details in Rocky is that the dog, Butkus, was actually Sylvester Stallone's own pet. Butkus wasn't just a companion, he was a lifeline. Stallone was so broke before the movie that he had to sell Butkus for $50 just to buy food. After he sold the Rocky script, he tracked down the buyer and bought Butkus back for $3,000. Stallone later said Butkus was his real partner through those hard years, and having him in the film made the story even more personal. The bond between Rocky and his dog wasn't acting. It was Stallone's own life on screen. 5. The famous ice rink scene was born out of poverty. In the script, Rocky was supposed to take Adrian on a date to a crowded ice rink filled with extras, but the budget couldn't cover the cost of hiring people, renting skates, or managing such a big set. Instead, Stallone rewrote the scene into something simple. Rocky and Adrian alone on the rink after closing hours. This change wasn't just cheaper, it became one of the most iconic and intimate moments in the film. The emptiness of the rink perfectly symbolized their loneliness, making the scene far more powerful than the noisy crowd originally planned. 6. A real fight scene. Nearly turned bloody. When Rocky finally gets his big fight against Apollo Creed, the punches look painfully real, and some of them were. Stallone and Carl Weathers, who played Apollo, spent weeks choreographing the fight, but accidents kept happening. Stallone once took a punch so hard to the ribs that he had to be rushed to the hospital. He even suffered swelling in his face after several blows landed harder than expected. Still, both actors pushed through the pain to keep the fight looking raw and believable. Stallone later joked that making Rocky was the closest he ever came to being a real boxer. 7. The Philadelphia steps were almost empty. Today, running up the steps of the Philadelphia Museum of Art is one of cinema's most famous images. But when the crew filmed it, nobody knew it would become a legend. The production didn't even shut down the area or gather crowds. It was just Stallone running while a cameraman followed in a van. There were barely any people around because it wasn't planned as a huge moment. What started as a simple shot turned into the film's symbol of determination. and those steps are now visited by millions of fans every year, forever renamed the Rocky Steps. 8. The actors' families became the extras. With such a tiny budget, there wasn't enough money to hire background actors. So Stallone's own family filled the gaps. His father rang the bell during the boxing matches, his brother Frank played a street singer, and even friends were pulled in as random passers-by. In fact, many of the Philadelphia street scenes were filled with real locals who just happened to be nearby. This wasn't just a money-saving trick. It gave the movie its gritty, lived-in feeling. The faces you see in the background aren't polished Hollywood extras. They're real people, and that made the film feel authentic. 9. Burgess Meredith saved Mickey from being cut. The role of Rocky's grizzled trainer, Mickey, almost didn't exist in the script. Stallone originally planned to keep the focus only on Rocky's love story and his fight, but when veteran actor Burgess Meredith auditioned, everything changed. Meredith brought such intensity and grit to the role that Stallone instantly expanded Mickey into a key character. His tough love and fiery speeches gave the film its emotional weight, showing Rocky that winning isn't just about strength, it's about heart. Without Meredith's performance, Rocky might have lost one of its most unforgettable relationships. 10. Carl Weathers nearly lost the role of Apollo. Creed. Carl Weathers was a former NFL player trying to break into acting when he auditioned for Apollo Creed. At first, the producers weren't convinced he had the right charisma. But during his audition with Stallone, Weathers got frustrated and told him that the scene wasn't working because he needed to read with a real actor. Stallone, who was still unknown, laughed it off, but the comment sealed the deal. Weathers' natural arrogance and confidence were exactly what Apollo needed. That energy turned him into one of cinema's most iconic rivals, later becoming Rocky's closest friend in the sequels. 11. The final fight had a hidden trick. The climactic battle between Rocky and Apollo looks brutally real, but there was a hidden system behind every punch. Stallone actually wrote the fight like a script within the script. Each punch, dodge, and knockout moment was carefully planned, almost like a dance routine. The actors rehearsed it for weeks to make sure the hits looked convincing without causing too much damage. Even with the careful planning, Stallone still ended up with broken ribs, and Weathers suffered an injured nose. The pain was real, but so was the determination to make it perfect. 12. The film crew was tiny and exhausted. Unlike today's blockbusters with armies of crew members, Rocky was shot with a skeleton team. Sometimes there were fewer than 10 people on set, scrambling to manage cameras, lights, sound, and props all at once. The schedule was so grueling that the crew often worked long days without proper breaks. To keep things moving, everyone pitched in. Actors carried equipment, assistants doubled as extras, and Stallone himself helped set up shots. The exhaustion was real, but the small crew's dedication gave Rocky the raw, street-level energy that made it unforgettable. 13. The famous meat-punching scene was improvised. One of the most unforgettable images in Rocky is him punching slabs of raw meat in a freezer. Believe it or not, that moment wasn't in the script. Stallone came up with it during shooting after visiting a real meat locker. The scene worked perfectly. It showed Rocky's creativity and determination, training in any way he could. It also helped build the gritty, working-class atmosphere of the movie. The meat locker scene became so famous that real boxers started copying it in their own training, blurring the line between film and reality. The shoes and costumes were falling apart. Because the budget was so small, the actors' costumes weren't designer outfits. They were often Stallone's own clothes or items borrowed cheaply. His boxing shoes were so worn out that they had to be taped together to survive filming. Even Rocky's iconic gray sweatpants and sweatshirt were just old clothes bought for almost nothing. But this gave the character a real authenticity. Rocky didn't look like a Hollywood hero. He looked like a struggling fighter from Philadelphia. That raw, imperfect style made the character even more relatable to audiences. 15. The movie almost had a very different ending. Originally, Stallone wrote a downbeat ending where Rocky loses the fight and quietly leaves the ring with Adrian. It was meant to be more realistic, showing that sometimes the underdog doesn't win. But test audiences felt it was too sad, and the producers pushed for a more emotional climax. Stallone rewrote the ending so that Rocky still lost the match, but won the crowd's respect. and found love with Adrian. This compromise created one of the most inspiring endings in movie history, proving that victory doesn't always mean holding the championship belt. The film's music became a legend by accident. The famous Gonna Fly Now theme almost didn't happen. Composer Bill Conti had very little time and money to put the score together, but he wanted the music to feel uplifting and unstoppable, just like Rocky's spirit. The result was a song that not only fit the film perfectly, but also became one of the most recognizable anthems in cinema history. At first, the studio didn't think it would have much impact, but audiences were electrified. The track climbed music charts, turned into a worldwide symbol of motivation, and is still played at sports events today. 17. Stallone refused to sell the script. Without starring in it before Rocky was made, Stallone was a broke actor struggling to find roles. When he wrote the script, studios loved it and offered to buy it, but they didn't want him to star in it. Some offers went as high as $350,000, which would have been life-changing for him at the time. But Stallone refused every deal, insisting he would only sell the script if he got to play Rocky himself. He believed nobody else could capture the character's heart and vulnerability. That gamble almost cost him everything, but it made his career and turned Rocky into a legend. 18. The studio wanted a different lead actor. The producers originally imagined big Hollywood stars for the role. Names like Burt Reynolds, James Caan, or even Ryan O'Neal were considered. They thought a famous actor would guarantee box office success. But Stallone stuck to his demand, and eventually, the studio gave in because they realized his passion and performance were the soul of the film. Looking back, it's impossible to imagine anyone else as Rocky Balboa. Stallone's raw energy and real-life struggles mirrored the character so perfectly that casting him was the best decision ever made. 19. The film was shot in just 28 days. Unlike today's massive productions that take months or even years, Rocky was filmed in less than a month. The budget was tight, schedules were brutal, and there was no room for mistakes. Many scenes were shot in 1 or 2 takes, adding to the film's raw, spontaneous energy. The fast pace also meant some little errors made it into the final cut. But instead of ruining the movie, they gave it a sense of realism. That lightning-fast shoot proved that sometimes pressure and limits create the best results. 20. Rocky won the Oscar against all odds. Nobody expected Rocky to become a critical darling. It was a tiny movie with no famous star, barely any money, and simple filming techniques. Yet, when it premiered, it shocked Hollywood. The film earned 10 Academy Award nominations and won 3, including Best Picture. It beat out giants like Taxi Driver and Network, movies that were far more polished and expensive. This victory cemented Rocky as not just a film, but a cultural milestone, showing that heart, grit, and a good story could triumph over big budgets. Bonus fact: the legacy outlived the movie. The success of Rocky didn't just launch Stallone's career, it created one of the longest-running franchises in film history. Sequels, spin-offs like Creed, statues, and even annual fan events in Philadelphia all grew from that one low-budget film. Rocky Balboa became more than just a character. He became a symbol of resilience for anyone fighting against impossible odds. The underdog story that began in 1976 still inspires millions worldwide, proving that sometimes a simple dream can change the world.